What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Optimus Fantasy Football YouTube channel. I am Nate Polvogt. Next to me is my co-host, the one and only Mr. Keith Flemming, sitting and waiting, wondering who out of these 4 college football playoff games Georgia is going to have to face next weekend. How are you feeling about Georgia?
I feel pretty good. We got a great draw because we will play the winner of the Indiana Notre Dame game, which, to be like, not trying to be a jerk or cocky fan or whatever, but neither of those teams scare me. We would then get the side of the Boise bracket. So, I mean, you're talking about us potentially being in the Final Four before we play a team that really I'm worried about, being able to just beat us up front, which that's, I learned from Alabama because they beat us forever doing that. Yeah. And that is what Kirby has built at UGA, is just we're so strong up front that we wear on teams. I will admit, like, Boise would be a little scary for me because we have had issues stopping the run, and their running back is freaking incredible. But I'm like, can Boise State's run defense stop us? I don't know. So it was a great draw for the Dogs. I feel like that a lot of the teams that scare me the most, they're going to play each other and eliminate each other before we get to them, which is always great.
Yeah. The other game that's of interest to me is Penn State SMU, because I mean, those of us who are a little bit older remember that SMU was barred from participating in really anything. They called it the death penalty. Got it in 1985.
Great 30 for 30 if you've never seen it.
It's a phenomenal 30 for 30.
SMU doing NIL before it was legal, basically.
Oh, yes, very much so. And they were a very high-profile program then. To see them kind of crawl back out of those ashes roughly 40 years later and hit the college football playoff, I think is pretty cool. I don't think they can beat Penn State in College Station with the weather. Yep. Mm-hmm. But it's a cool story. I think this is a team that's going to be around for a while here. We've got Herms in the chat. Sup, boys? Might sound crazy, but how streaky Brock Purdy has been. Would you consider Penix Jr. versus the Giants over him? Keith?
You're asking the wrong guy, because I am big Penix energy. I do not remember a fan base rejoicing more for putting a rookie QB in, to the point where I'm a little worried that we're, now like almost no matter how, well Penix plays, we're going to be disappointed, because it's like we're thinking like touchdown Jesus is about to come on. But I will say that I think that Zach Robinson, the OC, has caught a lot of unwarranted grief because he's not allowed to run so much of what they do in San Francisco, Los Angeles, etc., because our QB couldn't run. He couldn't throw the ball deep down the field, and he didn't have zip on his ball, or move for that matter. Forget run. He couldn't move. And Penix is an athlete. So I think you're going to see a lot more of the Falcons playbook. And the Giants allow the most passing touchdowns per game. Lamar Jackson and again, I'm not comparing Lamar to Penix, don't get me wrong, but I mean, he just last week threw for 295 touchdowns. Yeah. And he didn't even have 5 incompletions. So the secondary, like, that Giants defense is just not the same without Dexter Lawrence. I don't hate it. I do, though, think that it's a pretty good matchup for the Niners as well, because they don't have the running backs, and I think they're going to be forced to throw being at home. I do think Brock has a good chance to have a decent game, but I don't hate it at all.
If I'm going for a boom, I'd probably go with Penix. I could see this with this matchup against the Giants, and the game's in Atlanta. This could be a blowout, but it could be Penix just kind of going off. I hope we get to see him use his legs a little bit. He's not known as a super mobile guy. This is going to be interesting. I would consider it, Herms. You already
Giants give up a ton of rushing yards to quarterbacks as well. Yep. And, Penix ran a 4.5 40. I don't want him running all the time because he's got 2 blown out knees, but he's an athlete. Yeah. It's just he's okay throwing it. And I'm excited to see, again, London, Pitts. We saw it for a minute when Cousins was playing okay, like in those Tampa games. They're like, oh, this is like a pretty scary offense with the weapons that they got around it. And then just Cousins became so limited. They were like, oh, we're not going to throw it anymore.
That was, I've seen a lot of Vikings fans who have said over the last couple of weeks, we were upset at the team letting Kirk Cousins go. We thought he would be the perfect bridge quarterback. And then the resounding, we cannot tell you how glad we are that Minnesota moved on from Kirk and went to Sam Darnold. Night and day in performance this season. We've got Bryce Long over there on YouTube, Keith. Big week, need to start 2 running backs and 4 flexes from this group. We've got Devon Achane. That's a must start for me. Breece Hall, Rico Dowdle. Again, he's someone that I'm starting this week. So I think we've got your 2 running backs here. Now, with the rest of this here, we're looking at a flex. Malik Neighbors, Cooper Kupp, Jawan Jennings, Brian Thomas Jr., and Garrett Wilson. Keith, how do you feel about this for the flex?
Neighbors is a must start for me. Like, you just look at the volume he's getting, and then I think the Giants have their best remaining passing quarterback playing this week, and Drew Lock.
Yeah.
So I really like Neighbors. I know it's, you got to get over getting hurt to go back to Kupp, but I just I can't sit Cooper Kupp.
No.
Over, those other guys. Like BTJ is in the same boat at this point, where again, just if you're talking about pure volume, it's outrageous at this point, like how much they're throwing it to him. And he's such a talented wide receiver that, why not? It's not like the Raiders are this unbelievable defense. Then the tough question for me is, do you go with Breece, Garrett Wilson, or Jennings? Because that's where I don't know. Like, it's hard for me to say I feel really strong about any of them. I would probably lean with what I saw from Breece Hall to Garrett Wilson or Jennings, and I would slightly lean Garrett Wilson. But
yeah, I'm with you on that. For me, it's going to be Garrett Wilson, and again, like you said, it's got to be Cooper Kupp. I know that last week was a bad week. I know that he burned people. He got me knocked out of 2 playoff matchups, but that's not the rule. That was an exception last week. Same thing with Matthew Stafford. I'm not scared to start him if I need to in 2 QB this week. I know, again, last week was bad. They didn't get a touchdown. Neither team did. That was an anomaly. So I'm with you on this one here. It is full PPR. It doesn't really change. I think we were kind of assuming here. We've got Chris Bird. He wants to know, Keith, would you start Hunter Henry or Pat Freiermuth at tight end this weekend? And also, as my second flex, would you go with Jalen Coker, Tyjae Spears, or Zach Charbonnet?
I love Hunter Henry. He's been somebody that I've been pushing for quite some time, but with it looking like, I don't know if they officially ruled, but I know it doesn't look like Pickens is going to play. I think you have to go with Freiermuth and assume he might be their number 1 target in that offense. And the Bills are actually pretty good versus tight ends, because I've been actually playing in one league, a deep league, Henry and Hooper a lot of weeks, because May just peppers tight ends with targets. But I do like the upside of Freiermuth, and I think unlike most weeks, if you're just talking about volume, it's going to be very similar, because again, who are the Steelers going to throw it to? It's almost impossible to throw on the Ravens. Like, that's going to be a rock fight. I think that could be a lot of passes to tight ends and running backs. That's good if you have Warren, Harris, same thing on the other side for Justice Hill, other than just Derrick Henry. And then I love Jalen Coker this week. If you look at the games that he's played, when he plays 69% or more of the snaps and gets at least 6 targets, which I think he'll do that again this week. He's averaging like 16 points per game, and he's really talented. They need that. Like, the teams are going to try to take away Adam Thielen, no Leggett this week. I don't know. Have they ruled? The only question I would have obviously about Charbonnet is if they rule out Walker again.
Sounds like Walker's playing.
Yeah, then I would rather go with Coker, because again, without Leggett, he will at worst be their number 2 option in the passing game. And he showed last week. I think he had 6 targets, 3 catches, over 100 yards, and a touchdown. He's a very explosive player that can make very little out of nothing. And you're kind of asking for a Hail Mary anyway with that group of 3 guys, especially if Walker's back. Like, if Walker's back, I can understand, going with Charbonnet and be like, just on volume alone. But otherwise, you're kind of looking for a miracle. And I think Coker's the one that's most likely to do that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Thielen's been seeing so much volume. Teams are going to try and take that away from Bryce Young moving forward. And with no Leggett, I think Coker is definitely the way to go here. And then I'm with you on Muth. There's no George Pickens. As much as I love Hunter Henry, he's not getting the touchdowns. That's been, as you mentioned, Austin Hooper's been getting those at the tight end position. So it would be Muth for me this week. I like the matchup against Baltimore because it's a divisional matchup. Pittsburgh always plays well in these games, and I think this will be no different. Especially, Dangerous has got something to prove here, man. He's got this team rolling, and if they can beat Baltimore this week, I think there's very little question that they bring him back next year. He's playing for a contract at this point. So we've got Albert Mariquin in the chat here saying hello, everyone. And then he's got a question for us, Keith. Pick 2, half PPR. Devontae Smith, Jordan Addison, and Jawan Jennings. Which one are you leaving on the bench of these 3?
Man. Do you know, is Goddard still definitely out? Because they put him on IR, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he's on IR. So knowing that, I would probably lean Devontae and Jordan Addison, but I do love Jawan Jennings, especially with them playing their 5th string running back. The difference just being is that Devontae and Addison are really been more explosive guys. Jennings had that one monster game, and I get that. Other than that, he's just kind of a PPR monster. There's so much more upside. And then like Addison, somebody I got to admit, I slept on like for DFS until this last week. He's consistently now getting 6 targets or more. And when Justin Jefferson is taking up so much freaking attention, and boy, does he take up a lot, it's just leaving Addison to kind of feast. So I would slightly, lean Smith Addison, but that's one of those I don't hate any of the 3 this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm leaning Smith Addison. Addison has been, like you said, very quietly phenomenal. I want to say here, I'm trying to pull it up here, going with the trends here on fantasy data. Over the last 3 weeks in average points per game, he is a top 10 wide receiver. Jordan Addison's been great. I would definitely roll him out. Jawan Jennings, I mean, yeah, fine if you have to, but Devonta Smith with no Dallas Goedert, I think that's the play here. We've got Jorge in the chat. How would you rank these running backs, Keith? Jerome Ford, Kendre Miller, and Patrick Taylor.
It's hard to not rank a running back for the Niners who you would assume would be the number 1 guy first. Like, it really is difficult, but I think I'd still slightly go Ford over Taylor. I know Kendre Miller has looked great, but that New Orleans offense, it is very difficult to trust them right now. And that's what I'm scared about. And the thing I like about Ford, especially with Chubb being out, he's also a pass catcher. Now, I know traditionally they have not leaned into a Browns back, taking a majority of both the early down and pass catching, but he still has that ability to catch passes. And I just think with DTR starting, I know that's gross for all the pass catchers for the Browns. I actually think that's a benefit for Ford, because they're probably going to lean on the run a little bit more, and those QBs are typically going to throw to running backs and tight ends. They don't throw it very far down the field. So if you do want to start Taylor, I get that, because if you think he's going to be the featured back, I mean, we know that's a huge workload, but I don't know, man. Like, I kind of have a feeling that may be a combination of backs and not what we've seen, whether it been Garendo or, Mason or whoever, like just being basically the featured back the entire game.
So here's where we're going to differ, because I'm going to rank them in the order they're in here. Ford, Kendre, Patrick, Taylor. I'm worried that Taylor's just not going to get volume, that this offense is going to go another direction. I get it. It's the Shanahan system. These backs thrive. We were excited about Isaac Garendo, but he's a 5th string back. And that's kind of where I struggle, where I think they're going to find more creative ways to maybe run the ball. Kyle Juszczyk, I think, we'll see some carries. I wouldn't be surprised to see Deebo Samuel lining up more in the backfield. We talked about this last week, but then Garendo played, so we just didn't really get the opportunities for Deebo. But I could see that this week in this matchup. So, but Ford's going to be a volume monster with DTR. I take no issue with that here. So, all right, guys, we're going to go on to Jorge. He's got one more question for us. Strange or Kincaid this week at tight end? Of course, Brenton Strange over there in Jacksonville, or Dalton Kincaid for Buffalo. Which one are you rolling with, Keith?
Man, this is last week my best call. If you listen to me on the Fantasy and Frame Sunday morning show or on the Sunday social show on Fantasy Six Pack. So the week went on. I just got more and more all in on Brenton Strange. And if he's a go, which I know he's questionable, looks like he's going to play. He's been a top 10 tight end. Now, I think it's 4 of the 5 weeks he's played 60% of the snaps, which he's going to do that again. He saw 12 targets last week. Like, this team has basically become, we're going to throw it to BTJ. And the other place that Mac Jones always throws is tight ends. Almost 28% of Mac Jones' pass attempts this season have gone to tight ends. And now Evan Ingram's gone to where that's just all strange. And then the Raiders are like, I know Kyle Pitts didn't do us any favors last week, but fourth most receptions, fourth most receiving yards allowed to opposing tight ends. I love Strange. Like this week, I think that he's a low key, like top 5 tight end this week because the Jags are going to throw. And that's literally, I think he's their number 2 guy now.
Yeah, no, it's strange for me as well. I love Dalton Kincaid, but man, he's not the focal point of the offense. I think some people thought he was going to be when they drafted him in the first round. They're finding other ways to get it done. He's a valuable part of the offense. From a football perspective, he does great. Just not the fantasy darling I think we thought we were going to get here. Jamie Brogg saying, if only the Steelers had another great, talented wide receiver, maybe someone like, I don't know, Roman Wilson. I agree.
What is the deal? Like, he's healthy now, right? They're just not.
Yeah.
That's scary for me because the Steelers are arguably the best organization at football of finding talent at wide receiver in the draft and knowing when to play them. Now, we saw this a little bit with Calvin Austin as well, who I really liked.
Yeah.
And then he didn't play like at all for the first year and a half. And now obviously he's out there a good bit, but it's a good question. I don't know what they're doing with Roman Wilson. You were at the Senior Bowl last year. Like, that dude was unreal. Seeing in person, so much more talented and explosive than I thought he was just playing for Michigan.
Quick feet, a really talented route runner, and the heart that kid has. Like, during his interview, he told a story. One of the interviews, I think it was up to like a Wednesday practice. And he told this story about when he was a kid growing up, he had to fly from one island to another in Hawaii to be able to play football in high school. So he had to get up every morning, get to the little tiny airport in his little town, hop on a little tiny commuter plane, fly 40 minutes to the next island so he could play football. He was leaving his house at like 2 a.m. to get to school. So there's got to be a reason, right? Like, he's just too talented. He's got too much heart. I trust Mike Tomlin. So we'll see. I just wish we could see him out here now. That's all. Bryce Long over here wants to know our thoughts, our bets on the Notre Dame Indiana game. Well, I'll give you my first one right now. The spread is 7 points. Notre Dame's favored by 7. I would bet Indiana to cover that 7-point spread. I do not think Notre Dame wins by a touchdown. I do think they win, and I'll take Notre Dame on the money line to kind of back that bet. But I'm telling you, take Indiana to cover that 7-point spread.
I'm conflicted because I do think that there's a big difference in talent at Notre Dame and Indiana. We kind of saw it against Ohio State. I will say, though, they had basically 2 weeks to get ready for this game, and their coach is a very talented play caller. So I think I'm with you that it's close. So I would definitely take the points. Having said that, I know I'm talking on both sides of my mouth. It would not surprise me if Notre Dame kind of waxes them either. It would not shock me. Sure. It would shock me if Indiana obviously won by, anything more than 4 to 7 points. I'd be like, oh my God. But I'm pulling for Indiana both because I love their coach. I love a guy that's like, I don't lose, I win. Google me. Like, what a great thing to say in front of, your fans the first time. And then he's backed it up. Like, I know they had an easy schedule. Let's be honest, Notre Dame hasn't exactly had a murderer's row either. So
all these SEC teams that everyone's talking about, it's not like those were. I mean, the SEC is a diluted conference to me at this point because you've got 20-something teams. So the talent isn't going to be as phenomenal as it was when it was 10, 11, 12 teams, and it was Alabama and Auburn and Georgia and
NIL's messed so much of that up LSU, too. As a Georgia fan, we don't have the depth because these 4 or 5 stars, if they don't play immediately, they're going to get big money to go to another school and be promised playing time. And Kirby is, from that Saban mentality, he doesn't promise anybody anything. And we've really seen it from a depth, position at a ton of positions, honestly. And that's why college football, I think, is more interesting moving forward. And I'm all for it. Like,
me too.
The more competitive, the better.
Look how, so I'm about to live like 10 minutes from Folsom Field, the Colorado Buffalo Stadium. That team turned it around in 2 years. College programs couldn't do that in the past. It was impossible with recruiting. So for me, I like NIL. I like it for the fact that some of these smaller schools, maybe if they can get some cash infusion, they can actually have a chance to compete. It's good for the school. It's good for the kids who go to the school. And obviously it's good for the school in cash as well. But I think
They
it's
just
made it
got
a
to
more
change the rules of players. Be like what happened at Penn State. Like to me, the guys they've got to move the transfer portal further back. Like we shouldn't still be playing competitive games and making kids make very difficult decisions of do you want to be a starting quarterback next year because you're probably not going to be at Penn State, or do you? Because like I mean, if you saw his interview, he was heartbroken that he had to leave, but he knew that that was the best decision for him. And I understand, why he did it, but it sucks the way they have it set up. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
no, they'll get it eventually.
That's what I'm thinking.
I hope so. It is the NCAA, so I guess you can
That's fair.
You don't necessarily know here. Vince Maps on the chat, send positive thoughts. Everyone, Tornado's just become homeless and right before Christmas too. Not exactly. We did buy a new house, but we're still in the old house until January 3rd. So by moving,
I can just see you with a sign. We'll give fantasy football advice for shelter. So
for moving help. How about for moving help?
No, that's their own personal hell right there. That's the whole reason I don't ever want to move. It's such a nightmare.
We're getting a dumpster and we're hiring movers. So there you go.
Smart.
Yes.
Very smart.
Vince has got a question for us. PPR pick 2 of Tyreek, Cup, or AJ Brown on one leg. I'm probably going Tyreek and Cup this week.
Yeah, you're on the line. People are forgetting Washington is not good versus the run. I know overall their rank's pretty good. They give up the second most rushing yards per carry. And Saquon Barkley absolutely had a monster game versus them the first time they played. I think you're going to see that again where Philly, they proved last week, look, we can throw it if we have to. But I have a feeling in this game it's going to be smarter for them to just hand it to Barkley in what is going to be just a raucous Washington crowd. And I think it's a big Barkley day. It's hard to sit AJ Brown, but again, Tyreek and Cup, like they're going to get volume, and I think Cup's going to have a big bounce back after the donut last week.
Yeah. All right, Jamie in the chat. Wouldn't it be funny if the Steelers picked up Deontay Johnson off waivers and used him to beat the Ravens? Unfortunately, because of the timing of the release, he would not be eligible to play this weekend, even if he clears waivers in time. So that's couldn't happen.
Mike Tomlin would never do. He has said some pretty. For him, blunt things about Deontay Johnson. And it's a big reason why I was telling people when this trade happened, I just don't trust Deontay Johnson. It was a great season with Carolina, and they were just like, take him. That's usually, to me, a huge red flashing, like, warning sign that you're actually one of the best wide receivers in football, and they're giving you away for pennies.
Yep. And he couldn't even stick with Baltimore, a team that needed that wide receiver talent. Jimmy wants to know here, Strange or Freiermuth this week?
It's closer, but again, I love Brenton Strange. Mac Jones has played a lot of quarterback this season now for the Jags, and almost 30% of his pass attempts go to tight ends. Other than BTJ, who do they throw it to? And I can't trust either one of the Jags running backs. Right. I know it's a good matchup, but it's like I can't do that. So I still think they're going to be throwing. And I like that O'Connell's playing. That means that I think the Raiders' offense will be better. They'll score more points. And then if it gets into that, I think you could see a good bit of passing on both sides to where, again, I think it's going to be a rock fight between Pittsburgh and they're calling for nasty weather too, right? If I'm not mistaken for this game. So I do like Freiermuth because again, with Pickens out, but I love Strange. I mean, it's, again, not a small sample size. 6 games now, 5 out of 6, top 10 tight end when he's played at least 60% of snaps.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's Strange over Muth for me. Partially because of matchup, partially just because, like you said, it's BTJ and it's the tight end. And the tight end this week is Brenton Strange. So Chris Robbins says, dude, Keith, go rest, man. The James Brown.
Detroit Beastie.
The James Brown of fantasy football. Oh, yes, Detroit Beastie. He is a friend of the show here for sure. We've got Tyler Sperry with a couple more questions here. Then we are going to get on the road to our Friday nights, Keith. Tyler Sperry wants to know Pacheco or Kendre Miller this week?
Ooh. Fudge sickles. I think I would probably lean Kendre Miller. I know I just said that I don't trust the Saints offense. I don't trust the Chiefs either. I know that they said Mahomes is good to go. I don't understand why you would start him. They're about to play 3 games in 11 days, and he's got a bad ankle. It just, something to me smells fishy. Like I could just see the Chiefs saying he's going to play, and then last minute pivoting to Carson Wentz. And by the way, last time Carson Wentz made a start, he had 17 rush attempts. So I don't think that if he starts, that won't eat into the rushing of, say, Pacheco. But I would lean Kendra Miller because Kamara is like out, right?
He's out.
Yeah.
He's not playing this week. I would also lean Kendre Miller. I don't trust either one of these offenses, but I trust the usage of Isaiah Pacheco even less, especially against Houston. Their secondary isn't great. If Patrick Mahomes does play, he could just be a dink and dunk all day and just beat that linebacker core in that secondary. Tyler Sperry also wants to know here, are we going Jacoby Myers or Jaden Reed this week?
I like Jacoby Myers. I know he kind of disappointed last week versus the Falcons, but that was Desmond Ridder. As long as Aiden O'Connell's playing, that is the caveat, because if Desmond Ridder plays, I would play Reed all day. But with Ridder, I mean, it's unreal how much he targets Myers and Bowers over his last 3 starts. In my article, it's going to be up on Fantasy Six Pack today. That's my favorite double spat for DK because it's like over 50% of his targets. And his last 3 games have gone to Myers and Bowers. So that is going to be huge volume to where Reed, we've seen this. Yeah, he could have a 2-touchdown, 100-yard game. He could also be targeted like 2 times. I don't ever know what to do with Green Bay wide receivers. It's like kind of the Josh Jacobs show, and that's it. So as long as O'Connell plays, because again, if it's Ridder, I do not trust Ridder. I'd rather roll the dice with Reed, but I like Jacoby Myers a lot if O'Connell's playing.
Well, it seems like everything's pointed towards O'Connell playing.
He didn't have a questionable tag anywhere, which is kind of crazy because they made it seem like there was some doubt. And I looked at it at DK today, and he didn't have a questionable next to him.
Gamesmanship. That's all it is. Coach speak. Mad Max wants to know who to start in his flex. He's got Debo, Brenton Strange, Tim Patrick, Malik Washington. This is a half PPR league. Are you sticking with Strange here in this group?
I think so. I will say that Malik Washington is really interesting. If Waddle is ruled out, like a uber talented guy. But again, with Strange, I think he's going to get at least 8 targets. Like I think that's basically his floor, and he's been targeted a ton in the red zone as well. So I would still lean Strange. It's such a sad world that Debo is not even a consideration. Like I literally would rank him 4th. That's how much I trust Debo Samuel right now. And the San Francisco 49ers offense with their 5th string running back, which makes it even kind of sadder what's happened to a guy that was one of my favorite players in the NFL just 2 years ago.
So this is fun. I'm going to lean Tim Patrick in this group, actually, over Debo, over Strange, over Malik Washington. 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. It took him a little while to get Tim Patrick involved in this offense, but it kind of looks like he's a legit wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. You can't throw the ball strictly to Amon-Ra. Jameson Williams is a deep threat guy. Tim Patrick does everything else. And
I like that especially with Montgomery out. Like, I think they're not going to just like hammer Gibbs because now obviously they need to keep him healthy too. Like they want to use him, but they also want to make sure that he's healthy for the playoffs. So I do like that argument.
Well, and against Chicago, he's not going to be drawing their top coverage. So he should be able to run a little bit free.
Jalen's definitely going to be on St. Brown.
Yeah, exactly. Jamie's got one more for us. Caleb over Mahomes, since we aren't trusting the Chiefs. Ooh, against Detroit, you could make a bigger argument for against Detroit than most other teams they've played. No, I can't do it. I can't start Caleb over Patrick Mahomes this week. If Mahomes is out there, I've got to start him.
Man, again, this is probably one of those that where in 2 weeks people are going to keep you idiot, but I would start Caleb over Mahomes. I think the Texans are a much better defense than Detroit. Detroit has now lost 16 defenders to IR. They did not allow 30 points in their first 13 games. They've allowed nearly 80 in their last 2. And I know they've played some good offenses. I don't want to say that, but I do think that especially if Caleb didn't run so much, I would be more concerned about it. But I mean, he did score, I think, like 24 points versus this team the first time. And I just like this Detroit. I think Detroit's going to be like fantasy gold now on offense and defense because almost all of their games are just going to be shootouts to where I really think this Texans-Chiefs game could be a slog where if Mahomes play, they're just both, because the Texans don't blow anybody out. Even if they're up, they'll just run Mixon. We've seen that right up the middle, to where I do expect Detroit to score on Chicago, and it could be very similar to what we saw in the first matchup, where if you remember, Caleb had nothing at half, and I had him in every Thanksgiving DK lineup, losing my mind, and then he threw 3 touchdowns, like 270 in the second half because they were in catch-up mode. So,
all right, I'll allow it. I think you might have actually convinced me. Well done. We got Derek Buck. Needs to start 2 out of this group, Keith. We've got Tyrone Tracy, Kendre Miller, Dalton Kincaid, Patrick Taylor. We've got Bigsby, Harrison Jr., Abdullah. This is full PPR. I'm going to say off of the bat, I would love to get Kendre Miller in that lineup. And this is going to sound weird, but even Amir Abdullah, if it's full PPR, I'd take a flyer on that this weekend with the matchup.
Man, you're so awesome, dude. I was selling Abdullah to somebody in one of our chats today. Over his last 6 games, 23 targets, 21 receptions. If you take away the 2 games that Sincere McCormick was a featured part of the Raiders' backfield, in those 4 games, he had 19 targets, 18 receptions.
Yeah.
Jags allowed 5th most receptions, 3rd most receiving yards to opposing RBs, and O'Connell is targeting running backs 20% of the time. If it is Ritter, that's even better because Ritter targets them at over 30%. So I'm with you. Like, I like that. Falcons are good versus running back, so I can't, trust Tracy. I don't throw it to him a lot, even though he's a wide receiver. Right. And then Bigsby, it's such a good matchup. But again, that Jags, I don't ever know what they're going to do. Like, I never know what they're going to do with their backfield. And it's, kind of sad, again, what I was saying with Debo, with Harrison Jr., that I just like, it's the Connor McBride show. And those are, like, including Kyler Murray, those are the only 2 Cardinals that I can count on week in and week out and be like, yeah, start them. No brainer. And Connor has such a great matchup that I think he's going to have a huge day. And, again, if they throw it, it's probably going to be mostly McBride.
The Cardinals are, I know as fantasy managers, there are so many people who are pissed off about the whole Marvin Harrison Jr. thing. He's just not getting the volume. He's supposed to be the overall wide receiver 1 going straight to the Hall of Fame at the midway point of this season, like we love to do with some of these players. But really for him, this is an ideal situation. No pressure for the rookie. He gets to just go out and play his game. He doesn't have to be a featured piece. He doesn't have to save this offense. They're doing fine just the way they're doing it. Will he be more of a featured piece in the future? I certainly hope so. He just didn't need to be this season. And I was kind of staying away from him at cost this redraft season because of that. We got Forever Eagles. Since Kamara is out, who is more RB2 trustworthy? Tyrone Tracy, Najee Harris, Patrick Taylor, or Kendre Miller? This is half PPR.
Again, I would slightly go Miller over like Harris and Tracy. But if you want to start Najee, like, I don't hate it because I know Baltimore's a great run defense, but we saw last week they're targeting the backs a lot more with Pickens out. But I think Kendre Miller and, Rattler, like the offense looked much better. I was giving the Saints a lot of crap partly because I'm a Falcons fan, but they did look a lot better with Rattler. He's going to start. And, Miller is a very talented back. So I kind of go Miller, but I could understand the case for Harris or Tracy.
I could be talked into Harris because of the matchup, because Pickens is out, because Wilson has been targeting running backs more. But I'm going to stick with Kendre Miller here. I think he's the best play. He has the highest upside out of these 4 guys. This is the fantasy semifinals. There's no messing around here. Tajay Spears, though, is on the waiver wire. Would you pivot to Spears over these other guys?
I know he had a great match last week. I have so many best ball lineups that are dead now. Or teams that had Tajay Spears because I love that dude.
Yep.
But as long as Pollard is playing, he did that on like 7 touches. That's what, again, shows Spears' talent. I just can't trust him to get volume to where, again, Kendre Miller, I would assume Taysom Hill is still out. Now there's no Alvin Kamara. We know the Saints, just whether it's throwing, running, whatever, they feed their backs. So I just think the volume alone is much better than taking a shot on Tajay Spears, who would have to, again, have a monster game from, say he gets 10 touches this week. That would be probably the most he's had in 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I love Tajay Spears. I have a ton of Tajay Spears in Dynasty. Was that a mistake? Maybe. But Yeah, I wouldn't roll him out over any of those other guys. One more here from Forever Eagles. In his other league, he's facing the number 1 seed. He needs us to pick 2 here. Tyrone Tracy, Patrick Taylor, Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, also available on the wire. Tyjae Spears, Alexander Madison, and Tank Bigsby.
I'm going to go ahead and say right off the bat, I would go get Alexander Madison. Again, he's going to be the featured back. Like, again, I like Abdullah a lot, but Madison is another guy that's kind of just a PPR cheat code, which I'm assuming this is a PPR league. If it is, like, I would actually have Madison 1 out of all these guys. And then I would slightly have probably Harris over Tracy and Stevenson, but I'm okay with any of those. I don't like how New England's been using their backs lately. It's also now just kind of a muddled backfield where Antonio Gibson's used a lot. And again, if they would just throw the ball to Tracy more, like the Falcons are very good versus the run. We struggle with running backs in the passing game, but I still think the most receptions he has a game is 4. This is a guy who played wide receiver like in college. I don't understand why the Giants don't throw it more to him because he's so electric anytime he has the ball in his hands.
Well, because it's the Giants. That's why.
Fair
but, yeah. So, yeah, I would go get Madison and then I'd start Najee Harris. I'm right lockstep with you. Jamie wants to remind all y'all, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe if you're here, guys. We are here every Friday to give you that sweet, sweet fantasy advice. Next week, most of us will be in the championships. And we just can't wait to help you guys hopefully win. One more here. Do we trust the Love Dobbs stack in a strange and flex? Got Tracy, Pickens, and Waddle all out or questionable. Do I trust it? No. Would I do it anyway, given your situation? Yes.
Yeah, I'm right with you. Especially like the Dobbs is a part that I'm really concerned against. I will say I keep forgetting that Green Bay game is in Green Bay, which makes me like Kendra Miller even more. I'm pretty sure it's going to be cold as F for a Monday night kickoff. So at least Love is used to that, but I do worry that like it may just be a huge Jacobs day. So I would, want to at least see what QBs are around because again, like there's guys like Aiden O'Connell who I think that is, he might be available. Maybe Michael Penix is available. Even Drew Lock, who I know it sounds
Matthew
disgusting.
Stafford is available in a lot of leagues.
He's
a guy you can go grab and start.
I would grab him in a second because Drew Lock has actually scored 16 points in both of his starts without throwing a passing touchdown. The reason being at least 57 rushing yards in both of his starts. So there's other guys that I just think that there's a good chance they're going to be throwing and be able to do a lot of stuff to where I do worry that Green Bay is just going to pound it down New Orleans because we've seen them do that in quite a few games where they have an advantage, with their run game versus a run defense. The Saints' run defense is really bad.
Very bad. He does have Russ and could pick up Michael Penix. He's been thinking about going after Penix all week. This would be a spot I'd probably be okay with taking a flyer on Penix. Matthew Stafford is available in roughly 60% of leagues on ESPN right now.
That is outrageous.
I
think I do think I like him slightly more. I mean, I know Love
kind of do.
Just going back and looking at it, like last week they scored 30 points. He threw for 220 and 2 touchdowns. The week before they scored 30 points. He threw for 206 and 1 touchdown. They're just really leaning on that run game. Week before that at home, 274, 2 touchdowns. That was because Jacobs, remember, could not get it going versus Miami. I don't think that's going to be a thing versus the Saints. I think I do like Penix because the Giants look like a terrible run defense, and I don't understand what's happening. But since Dexter Lawrence has been out, they've actually gotten better versus the run, but they've been awful versus the pass because 2 weeks in a row, it's been running backs have had great matchups and Kamara, and then last week with Henry, and in both weeks, they didn't do anything on the ground where both teams were able to actually throw on him. So I do like Penix over Love, especially if you think you need the upside. I don't think Jordan Love since that first game has had a monster game. Or since I take that back. The Minnesota game where they were down big early, I know he scored a bunch of points, but that's really been it. Other than that, he's just been somebody 200 yards and how many touchdowns does he throw?
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. I would do it, Reaper. Go for it.
And a dome too, which is nice.
Exactly.
You ain't got to worry about weather or nothing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Well, that is going to do it for Keith and I. We're going to get out of here. It's almost Christmas. We will not see y'all again until after the big, snowy, fat man in a red suit day. But we will be back next week to help guide you guys through the fantasy championships. If you need more help, tune in this Sunday over there on Reddit. Dear Santa, define nice. I mean, you make a fair point here. Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Mike Reedy and I will be on Reddit for the Sunday Start Sit AMA, that last minute love for your lineups, guys. Until then, I'm Nate Polvogt. That dude over there, wait, other way, that is Mr. Keith Flemming. We'll see y'all next week.